for this day. We are coming to an end very shortly, and we have prolonged the previous lecture. So, without further ado, may I present to the stage Mr. Tymon Smektała from Techland.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I think you can. Yes, I can hear myself as well, so it's good. Thank you for joining me. I can't see most of you because there are lights in my face, but once again, thank you for joining me. For all of you, especially to my Techland friends that I actually see in the first row, but I know you are over there as well. I hope you will have fun today. I know it has been, with this presentation, I know it has been a long day. So without further ado, let's start this. The theme of the talk is how to design a AAA sequel, tips, insights, methods used during the creation of Dying Light 2 Stay Human. And I am Tymon Smektała from Techland. So let me start with introducing myself. I am a lead game designer at Techland, hopefully. General good spirit. I'm not sure about the guys in the front, if they agree or not, but I hope they will. I'm the member of the amazing Techland family for more than 9 years. I have been a part of game industry for more than 2 decades. Maybe it's a little shameful to admit that. I started as a video game journalist. I worked at CD Action. I was running the website for the magazine. I also did some other things in my life. I have PhD in economics. I have released 4 music albums in the hip-hop genre, so I can say yo in the same way as Japson or BedOS or Snoop Doggy Dogg. Hopefully, I have published 3 books on public relations and also about hip-hop music, but definitely out of all of those life adventures, making games is the best thing I ever did, especially making games at Techland. So moving to this, I will slow down a little bit. I joined in 2013 as a producer for Dying Light. I actually didn't produce anything at that point because I very quickly moved to a game design. I should be a junior game designer because I didn't know anything about actually making games. But I was a game designer. Then I started getting more and more into it. And then for Dying Light, the following and then enhanced edition, I was almost like a lead game designer. I said almost because the following was a small project and there wasn't that much of a team to lead. So I became like a real lead game designer. I love this animation. With Dying Light 2 Stay Human, which has been released this year, where I was a full-time lead game designer. Getting back to the business, getting back to the thing, all of us came here to Krakow. And actually, I don't think it's my talk. I think it's actually this, which is the famous Plac Nowy Zapiekanka. So I have decided to create my presentation kind of like the Plac Nowy Zapiekanka. So here is what you can expect in the Plac Nowy Zapiekanka format. We'll start with the Zapiekanka base. The most important, the longest part of my talk will be insights into some of the decisions that we have made during the pre-production and ideation of Dying Light 2 Stay Human. This was the moment where we were forming what Dying Light 2 Stay Human will be. So it was actually the crucial part of development. We spent quite some time on it to make sure that we understand what we want to do with the game. Then we'll have the topping, and this will be a neat trick, very simple one, that we have used to explain the game internally to the team. But I think you will like it. I say it's the topping, it's the juicy bits, because actually you will see something that not many people outside of Techland really saw. It will be like a very early stuff from the production of the game. I also think that my friends from Techland will see it, like not for the first time, but they have seen it already, but maybe this will be quite surprising for them because I don't think they have seen it recently. And then we'll have the sauce, which will be just like a simple anecdote that happened to us when we were presenting the game to the public, and some reminder, some lesson that comes from it. So, this will be focused on high-level game design, additional bits of communication. So if these are the things that might interest you, let me once again welcome you. I hope you will have fun within the next 45 minutes. Dying Light 2 Stay Human, what it is. So it's a AAA game. It has been released on all possible platforms, bar Switch, which is coming. It's first-person perspective game. It's open-world action RPG. I have bolded open-world and action because, like, this defines the game. It's open world, it's action with bits of RPG. It offers a single-player, non-linear campaign. It is story-driven. It offers choices and consequences, so player can impact what's happening around him. And it is for up to 4 players in online co-op. And if you have ever worked on a game which is story-driven but also has co-op, you know how difficult it is. You know how hard we made it for ourselves when we decided to create a game like this. How it fares? Actually, quite good. The game has reached more than 3 million players within the first weekend. At one point, in terms of concurrent players on Steam, it was the 25th most played game in the history, with Skyrim, the almighty Skyrim, being 24th. So this is like an amazing achievement. I think no one ever thought we would be on that level. Within the first month, we have sold more than 5 million copies, and of course, the numbers are still growing. So it's not your usual sequel. We knew from the start that we will not approach the game as a usual sequel. It's not just bigger, louder, and more, because we decided to take some quite courageous steps when designing the game. Why? Because we are Techland, which means we are completely crazy. We are like the zaniest people on the planet, and we just don't care. We do the most exciting stuff that we want to do, the most exciting games that we want. There was some reasoning to that, so I will explain what that was. So, starting point for the production was the success of Dying Light 1. Just to go through it quickly, you see the numbers, so I will not read everything, but the important thing is it was extremely successful. It was very successful when we were starting the development of Dying Light 2 Stay Human, because when we did that, the game still had 500,000 players, monthly active users. I think the one thing that really makes Dying Light stand out is the completion rate for the game, because the first game has been completed by more than 45% of players, which is roughly 15–20% more than most of the games that are being released. But I think an even more surprising number is the number of people that have finished all of the side quests, which currently is more than 25%, where for most games it's around 5, maybe 10% at maximum. So this means we had a very dedicated and a very large community that was playing the game actively, wanting more from the game. So we knew this is like a huge responsibility we need to take on our shoulders. We also had some considerations to do. The work started in second quarter of 2016, which was right after the release of Dying Light the following. Of course, it started slowly. It started with pre-production. We knew that it's going to take us quite some time. We knew that it's not going to be like this quick and dirty job, usual sequel, for various reasons. One of them was that we were changing the technology of the game. Previous games, Dead Island, Dying Light, Call of Juarez, up to Chrome, were working on a Chrome engine, our first in-house engine. Then we decided to move to C engine, which took some parts from the previous one, but generally has a lot of new things in it. And we had to do it because we had to remove the technical debt. We also decided as a company to focus on first-person open-world games with like high-fidelity graphics, which required a lot of data streaming, so we need to change our engine to make it work. We also had a lot of internal studio ambitions were extremely high, because we were successful with Dead Island, we were successful with Dying Light, but we still felt that we need to prove ourselves as a developer. We felt that we need to do more, we need to do better, we need to make sure that the Techland name is being considered as one of the top developers in the world. And for that, we have also started changing how we work on games. Techland started as almost like this garage company. Techland is the longest running, I hope I'm not saying anything wrong, but I think that's actually true, that it's the longest running active developer of games in Poland. So we have published more than 30 titles, we have more than 20 years of development history. So because we started as a garage company, we had to improve our processes. We had to grow our processes with the company as well. So that was another reason why we decided to work on Dying Light 2 Stay Human differently and on a steady pace. And actually, we had the luxury to do it because after the previous successes, we had a lot of financial stability. And Dying Light is our own IP. So it's like the royal treasure. It's the most precious thing that we have, because if we don't mess it up, then we can reap all of the benefits as a studio of the game. This slide here is actually not by accident. It is to tell you that I believe that making games is like this really wild adventure, that you can discover, you can experience amazing things, but you never know what's going to happen. And it will be difficult, it will be hard, and a lot of things will surprise you. So the best thing you can do for a wild adventure like this is to prepare as much as you can, as good as you can, and pack up. And for games, packing up and preparing is this process called ideation and pre-production, and I would like to focus on this right now. So, usually when we were making games at Techland, we started with two things. The first one was defining the experience. What is the thing that player will live through? What is the thing that player will experience when he plays our game? And for Dying Light, it's basically survive the zombie apocalypse in the walled city. I'm using the word zombie in quote unquote because those are infected monsters in our game. And another thing that we start with usually is defining the USPs, which is a nice acronym for unique selling points. So it maybe sounds a little businessy, but it's important because making games is actually a very difficult business. So you have to make sure that whatever your game has the potential, has the elements that will allow the game to sell, so it can make the studio survive and live and thrive and prosper. So for the first game, we have defined the USPs also at the start, and we have developed them over the production of Dying Light 1. So the USPs for the games are Parkour, which is this immersive, free-flowing method of movement to the environment where you see everything from the first person. As I said, you feel the flow of moving through the environment. It's first person, again, melee combat, which is quite unique. Like, you don't see that many games doing this. There are a lot of melee combat games which are TPP. There are a lot of first-person games which are shooters, but not many are actually first-person melee brawlers. It's very visceral, it's very immersive, it's of course based on melee weapons, and it allows players to express their brutality. And for the first game, the third USP was day and night cycle. For us, it was a way of almost like offering two games in one, where the rules of the game and the context of the game was changing, and also the enemy behaviors was changing. So players could, they would spend $60 on the game and would get two games for the price. So we thought it's really unique. It's really something that sets Dying Light apart. With this base, we started working on the sequel, and we started wondering what can we improve and how we can improve that. And with sequel, it's quite unique because you actually have a wealth of information about how your game is consumed. So this is what you have to do. This is what you have to dig into deep and start analyzing what people do. And you do that by, of course, analyzing Steam reviews, Reddit posts, Twitter posts, mentions, reading game forums, game wikis, reading reviews and news and comments below those reviews and news. You, of course, watch YouTube and Twitch streamers that talk about your game and create those crazy videos, what they should improve, what they should add, what they think about the game, what are the best things about the game, what are the things that they miss, what are the things that are hidden in the game. You also look at achievement or trophies completion rates. This is a great source of gaining very quickly data of what your players interact with. And of course, if you have prepared for this, you can also gather data from the game. And we did that with the first game. We actually had tons of data, which at the start we had quite a few problems with analyzing. So when you analyze that data, you look for what people like, what they don't like, in terms of basically everything: characters, activities, game tone. You look at completion rates of various types of your content. You also look when people drop out the path and don't ever return to the game. You look at things that people interacted with, be it the story elements, the open world elements, what kind of enemies they have fought, what kind of weapons they used, which are the favorite weapons, which weapons they used most often, etc., etc., etc. And also you look at players' rituals, how long they spend, how often they connect, are there any specific time periods where they connect, and this allows you to kind of start guessing what your community wants, how can you improve your game, but it's a lot of data. So a very crucial thing is to start to develop your own process of processing this data, of analyzing this data. I don't want to tell you what it should be, because for every game it might be different, but definitely this is required. Why? Because then you will be able to use the data to communicate with your team, to show it to your CEO, your director, but also to the team members, and try to explain to them why you feel some decisions are important, why you feel some decisions should be made to make the game better. These people will not have time to really analyze everything. They just want a clear and concise information presented in a clear and concise way. So that's why you need to find a way of visualize it. When we were doing this, we understood that there are things that people cherish about our game. So it's the immersive in-your-face gameplay, which related to our USPs, Parkour and Combat. It's effective and impressive traversal mechanic. It's visceral creative fights. It's the general concept of the day and night cycle. But we have also found out things that they would like us to improve on. So for Parkour, it was the fact that you could overcome any obstacle in the game just by pressing the same button. It was like the jump button, the Parkour button on the controller, it's RB. And every action that you performed, Parkour action that you performed in Dying Light 1 was basically made with this one button. Another thing that people didn't really like is that the Parkour didn't evolve over the course of the game. When it came to combat, people didn't like the generally hack and slashy feel of it, which was also based on the fact that we focused a lot on the stats of the weapons and the differences between the weapon damage and the enemy health. And even if you were playing your best game, if you didn't progress your character and didn't get the best weapons, it was very hard for you to fight the enemies. Even like if you were extremely skillful, it was very hard because of the stat differences. And also they didn't like the lack of variety in encounters. Another thing that people noticed was the very loose connection between combat and parkour. In Dying Light 1, how it usually looked is that you were traversing through the city and jumping and running, and I will not do parkour here because I will fall down, but you were doing this, stopping for a combat encounter, slashing, and then you were continuing your parkour run. So we wanted to connect those things, definitely. We have also found out, mostly by analyzing data, this wasn't really clear from looking at player feedback, but we saw that in data that we have gathered from the game, that a lot of people were basically skipping the night part. They didn't play it at all. So we thought that our master plan of delivering 2 games in one basically failed, because a lot of people were just skipping one of those games, the night part, And some people also didn't like that we had a very single-tracked solution for most of the night challenges. When you were spotted, you were just turning back and running to the nearest safe house. That was also something we wanted to change. I specifically said about the night time being mostly optional, and that it came from the data gathered from the game, because another important thing is that you can look at the feedback that's expressed by words by people online, but you also have to cross-check it with the information that you get from the game, because only then you can really start analyzing and understanding what those words mean. Another thing that people didn't like, and actually we didn't have like a solution for it, it wasn't relating to our USP, but we decided to do something with it, which I will explain later, is that players felt lack of player agency in the story. Yes, and we also thought that people don't like the goofiness of our game, that you can go do really crazy stuff with the weapons, with the enemies. Like you can impale them and set them on fire and then drop kick them and they will fall down to the ground and maybe hit someone there and the other person will get burned. So actually at the start of the game we had a process which we called degoofication, where we wanted to make the game more serious, but actually that was our fault. At one point during the production we have realized we shouldn't degoofy the game that much, because actually the goofy part is what makes Dying Light interesting, exciting for a lot of people. And we made that mistake. We set this as one of the things we would like to change, because we didn't, at the very beginning, analyze the data well. We just looked at the comments. We just took some of the comments about the goofiness out of context, and we said, okay, so this means that it's wrong, so we need to fix this. So you really need to get analytical, and if possible, you basically should put 2-3 people just on it, just to analyze data. This can be game designers. If you have someone who's a data analyst, put them together, because they will really give you like the real important results that you need, something that really means something. When you know what you want to improve, you also need to start defining how you want to improve it. And the best way to do it is to try to understand your gamers, because like for any design challenge, you can fix it in thousands of ways. So you need to choose the correct one, and to choose the correct one, you need to choose the one that will work for your gamers. So for that, we have used the classic Bartle's taxonomy of players. This is a taxonomy that has been criticized and praised by a lot of people over the years, because it's been with the game design for quite some time, but actually for me it works. We were trying to use different taxonomies, we were trying to come up with our own, but then we came back to the fact that it's basically that players can be divided into those 4 groups. So we have killers, achievers, socializers, and explorers. And then we started looking at the habits of players and rituals of players and the type of content they were looking, and this allowed us to identify which of those groups are present within our community. We have realized that it's mostly explorers, also some achievers. Killers, not so much. Killers are, the simplest version are the guys that are focused on online competitive gameplay. Socializers, a little. We have online components, we have co-op components in our game, so we also had some of those. We choose explorers as the most important ones, of course, achievers as the second one. We looked at what motivates those players. And then when we were developing solutions to the issues I have mentioned before, we were looking through the lenses of those types of players, how they would like to improve those elements, what we can do to motivate them even more to play our game. So with that being said, we started working on moving with the pre-production, and maybe didn't always work for us, but at least we tried to stay focused and don't overdo and don't over-design ourselves. So to achieve that, you need to choose the precise areas you want to improve, define the goals that you want to achieve within those areas. So going back to parkour, I will explain that in a minute. So you choose parkour, what exactly you want to achieve in parkour. Looking at your players, you define methods, how you want to achieve those things for parkour for those players. And the important bit is, again, something that maybe we weren't 100% on all the time, was that to keep the elements that people like, that people cherish, intact, or accept the risks of doing otherwise. The important thing is you don't want to alienate your audience. Like, you want to give them something new, but you can't alienate them. It's always like a balance act between old and new. And what I suggest is that you will see in a moment. But avoid wasting resources on too many crazy ideas. This is a sequel. This is not a new IP, so you don't want to spread yourself too thin. And this is actually one thing why we chose Villador as the place where the game takes place. We didn't want to alienate the audience, so we were looking at, we knew that it's going to be fictional because the first game was placed in a fictional city. We had quite a few ideas where the game could take place, but we have settled on the European fictional city. Why? Because we came to a conclusion that majority of our gamers is from US. And for Americans, Europe and European cities is the thing they would like to see, the thing that they would like to experience. They have a lot of patterns and imaginations and sights from movies, etc., how Europe looks. But for Americans, actually going to Europe is like this once-in-a-lifetime trip. It's not that easy to see Paris, Venice, Berlin, Amsterdam. We can just hop into a car, go there and see those places. For them, it's really like this element of this wild adventure they can go to. Another thing is we also wanted to cater to our Asian audience. We have a lot of players in China, Japan, Korea. And for Asians, again, European cities are this like great adventure they can take. So we felt that this will be the place, this will be the setting that will be interesting for them, but will not alienate them. And it was also kind of easy for us because we know Europe, so we knew how to build European cities. But the thing is that no matter how you look at this, I think actually what Engineer Mamon said is true. Like, he only likes the melodies that he heard already, and people, gamers, also don't want to be surprised. They also like things that they heard, experienced, seen already. But what I want you to say with this, and what I'm about to say right now is quite blasphemous, is like, you know this guy, this is Bruce Lee, right? So like a legend, a myth. And he has this famous saying that, be like water. So actually, I think that when you work on a sequel, you must do something else than Bruce Lee says. But I think that if Bruce Lee would be working on a sequel and would be working in game development, he would turn into this laser Bruce Lee, and he would like you to be like laser, because you really have to be strict, precise, and you don't want to spread yourself too thin where it's not necessary. So quickly, because I think actually the time is flying fast, sorry. What this means for the actual game. So for parkour, we have defined the area of improvements, which is fixed all parkour move, traversal gameplay doesn't evolve. We have defined goals for that element, that is, we want to have deeper and more challenging parkour mechanics. We want to have controller interactions that change with game progression. And we want, in the end, create real and immersive parkour game. We have applied the solutions that you see here. There was a great talk today from Karol and Bartek that presented their approach to creating parkour. If you missed it, make sure that you will watch it later online. So what we did is we did environments that have different requirements, require you to use different moves. Those moves have various difficulties. Bartek and Karol have expressed it very nicely. Another thing that we have did is we have introduced parkour puzzles. We have introduced missions which are focused on parkour, and like a lot of tech improvements that made you feel more like you're parkouring, like doubled or maybe even tripled the number of actual parkour animations. We have added self-shadow, etc., etc. For combat, there are area of improvements on your left. The goals defined in the middle. The most important thing that we did there was, and we focus on it mostly, was the thing about combining parkour and combat. We spent quite a lot of time on developing skills and honing and perfecting the skills that allowed players to combine parkour moves and combat moves. And for the day and night cycle, this is actually the part that we felt that we did the worst job in the first game, because as I said, a lot of people were skipping the night part. We wanted to make day and night the core of the experience. We wanted to motivate players to explore at night, and we wanted to create more systems that would allow players to actually play with the night, have some fun with it. And it was like the biggest decision that we have made in regards to this, because we have embedded the day and night cycle more into the world building. So we have came up with this idea that the day is for humans and the night is for the infected, which means that during the day you barely see any infected. They're hiding inside dark places, etc., etc. During the day, the humans come out. You can fight with humans, you can interact with humans, you can do quests with humans. But then when the night comes, the infected come out. So now it's this scary part of the day of the day and night cycle, where it's really dangerous, where it's really extreme. But then you can go inside interiors, those dark places, to loot them, because the best loot is inaccessible during the day because it lies in the dark places. But what about the last thing that I mentioned as areas for improvement, which is the lack of player agency in the story? And this was probably the most difficult that we had to face. And this is also like my fourth suggestion or tip. Try to make the new thing that you are adding to a sequel really matter. Because previously I said, okay, don't overdo, don't over-design. If you have a solid foundation, just understand precisely how you want to make it better, and that's it. But if you add something new, try to make it really matter. So we had this problem of lack of player agency in the story. Like, it could be seen by people writing like things like this on Steam, etc., expressing their feeling that the main character, Kyle, is stupid. Why did he do this? There's this moment in the game where he destroys a crate of antizin, which no sane person would destroy, but it was important for a narrative. There's another one, which actually for me personally is the most, like, where I felt the lack of player agency most, is when he is not helping Rahim, his friend, but going on a mission and leaving his friend to die, as we see in the end. So we wanted to solve that, and our creative director said, you know what, guys, in the narrative, we need to give players the same amount of freedom and expression that they have in gameplay. We are an open world sandbox game, so you can do a lot of stuff by your own, defining your own solutions in gameplay. So creative director said we need to do the same in the story, which I first heard, and like I have hidden myself under the table because it sounds scary. Then he said, you know what, I have a solution. We do narrative sandbox, which I have hidden myself even more, because I said, exactly, what does it mean? We didn't really knew. We had a catchy name, and we knew what direction we want to go. And it actually took us some time trying to define what that could be, what that catchy name could mean. Of course, we started with a very direct, very simple approach. We just took the story and make it like extremely non-linear and branching. This is Dying Light story at one point. I think it's not even the most rich version of it, the biggest number of branches. But then we realized that basically we shouldn't piss in the wind. Like, it's too much. We will never be able to handle this, and still it will be in a way finite. So then we decided to use the strengths of our game, of the technology, of the design that we have, use what Dying Light is. And we wanted to make the new mother by focusing on what can be most impactful, most felt by players. So we started research and R&D of this and prototyping various ideas. We even did a board game at one point, and our solution was the city alignment system. So it's like quite simple system, but actually quite impactful, at least I believe that, is that players make narrative choices as they play the story, but some of those choices allow them to change the shape of the city by assigning various zones to various factions, to one of the factions. And the cool thing about it, and maybe it's just for me as a game designer, as a gameplay designer, exciting, but the cool thing is that those decisions and how you assign those zones make new gameplay mechanics appear in your game. Like combat helpers, parkour helpers, a lot of fun stuff. At one point, we even wanted to make even more mechanics connected to the player choices, but then we dialed this down because it will be too much. Don't piss in the wind. Try to focus on the thing you can pull off. Yes. So the city alignment was our answer to the lack of player agency in the story, and I think we have quite delivered what we wanted to do with this. But then you still want to enrich your game. Like you did the basics, you were precise when fixing them, you added something new, which you focused and spent time on to make it matter, but then you still want more, and working on a sequel is a very unique because usually like you only had one chance to work with your creation, and as any creative person, you know that really well. As you work on something, you have lots of ideas you would like to add. So usually they happen at the later part of the production where you can see the game better, so you have more ideas that are fitting, but of course you don't put them in because the production is running and you can't really do it. You also have lots of player feedback, like I want this, wouldn't it be cool if they added this? Maybe there's a new game that has been released which has from a similar genre that has some interesting ideas and which was very successful. Maybe your boss likes the new game and he would like to cram everything from the new game to your game. So you have a list of possible micro features that you could add, but please don't do it. Once again, be precise. Usually those things are not effective. They will just eat your resources. But there is one thing you can do. And I think what you can do is to create like a new angle from which you can look at your game, new spin, like a new direction. And maybe I'll do it like this. And for us, it was the modern Dark Ages. We have came up with this idea that basically Dying Light 2 is in parts still Dying Light 1, but we will look at it differently, putting it in a setting which we call the modern Dark Ages, which the idea, broad idea, high-level idea was that the civilization has collapsed. Sorry for the spelling mistake. Humanity has gone back to medieval times, but it all happens in the remnants, in the remains, in the scenography of the modern world. So this actually was like our new North Star. This was something that guided us through a lot of narrative design, world design, enemy design, weapon design, and you can see that here. That, for example, when we were designing locations, we were taking modern buildings, but because we had this new angle of modern Dark Ages, we added some wooden constructions on top of it, and suddenly the mall looks like a fortress, medieval fortress. When we were designing the enemies, we were looking at things like medieval illnesses like Black Death and leprosy. With weapons, it was actually very simple because our weapons are medieval by design, almost by themselves. Those are melee weapons. But because they were made from modern materials, they started looking unique, they started looking more interesting. So those were the decisions that we have made to define what Dying Light 2 should be. Dying Light 2 Stay Human should be. And then we faced another challenge, which was explaining the sequel. How to explain something like this. So, like we have an ambitious design, we introduce quite a few bold ideas, we improve on a lot of existing systems. So the thing that you do is you create direction Bibles full of pages and references to other sources. You write hundreds of design documents, like you create overviews and briefs and synopsises. But it has been said on this stage before today that no one reads design documents. I know it's not true. Like I know people do, but the thing is that design documents are not something that really allows you to see the game and stabilize the game in your head. And it's extremely important when you're working on a sequel and you change some things because you want to change how your team thinks about the game, because they have a lot of habits and connotations and understandings from the previous game. So if you change some systems, you really need to communicate them very well to make sure that no one thinks in the terms of the first game that people are moving to what the second game should be, next game should be. So what we did, and I think it was a really cool tool of explaining the sequel internally to the team, is we did this thing that we have called player experience movie. So we took the assets from the first game and we tried to create something which would be like a prototype of Dying Light to Stay Human, but it wasn't really like a fully playable prototype because we did this with animators, video editor. Like some parts of it were cheated. Like not everything was playable and working in the game. You will see that in a second. But we created a 30-minute movie presenting one mission from the Dying Light to Stay Human as we envision it. And I think it was, from my perspective, it was a very powerful way of explaining to the team what we wanted to achieve with the game. And this is the bit I promised you, something that not many people have seen before, because I have cut the 28, 30 minutes into something shorter just to show to you, so enjoy.
You read me? Got word from the PKs. Looks like they need our help again. They're looking for one of their snipers. Say he shot his commander in the back, made a run for it.
Nice.
Also, some PK conscripts got themselves lost near city center. So either we go after this deserter, or round up
So in the first
conscripts.
game, the zombies, the infected
Let's find the
were
sniper
everywhere.
players.
So this was our way of visualizing that they hide in darkness.
Mark where he was last seen on your map.
We introduced the idea of survivors, of peacekeepers, of various zones in which the game takes place. We have shown some of the mechanics that we didn't have in the first game, but we wanted to have in the second game, which is, in this example, like a very simple binoculars gameplay,
3 likely spots our friend could be.
with focus on player agency, that we want to create missions where player has different options to choose from at any given point. We wanted to show how we envision the combat to look, connecting parkour. As you can see, this is a part where we did very simple animations because we didn't have those animations in the first game. Parkour combat, again, jumping over enemy. This is like the core move of Dying Light to Stay Human. The concept of dark places, those places where the infected hide during the day. So you can, actually you shouldn't explore them, but if you explore them, it's going to be very, very, very difficult and very scary. It's going to be dark in a moment. It wasn't originally that dark, I just couldn't find the final version, so it's like one of the versions before, which might be a little dark. This is like the immunity. We also had this idea that you have to fight with like your immunity going down, so you get things more and more endangered by the virus. I would love to say this is our chemistry because it looks like the chemistry from the second game, but it's actually a visual glitch, so we didn't have the idea of chemistry actually back then. This appeared later. Like a very powerful scene where you can see the virals, the infected, that they don't follow you into the light because they're scared of it. We also explained some of the ideas of the parkour puzzles, which we didn't have in the first game, presented in that way. So we wanted to explain to the team that we will be aiming at places where parkouring will be quite difficult and we will require a lot of focus and also stamina management. We also recreated some of the envisioned scenes from the night gameplay with the virals chasing you and being quite a threat. And with volatiles appearing like as this last threat, that when it appears you basically are done. The idea of survivors helping you if you make some correct choices in the story.
Some of your antigens to get you kicking again. Kept some for myself. Finder's fee, you know.
And also we wanted to recreate some of the feel of the modern Dark Ages, again to make people's brain cocks working and starting imagining how it could look. So that's it, quite exclusive. Like if you liked it, then you can say, whoa, whoa, I will say it for you, okay. So this was very crucial for us to communicate with the team internally to explain the game, using the first game and explaining the new things, the things we are changing based on the foundation of the first game. But then when you communicate with the community, and this is basically we're reaching the end in a few minutes. This is the sauce. This is the funny anecdote or an interesting tidbit from the late production is that when you communicate with the community, with your gamers, well, of course, you have the ambitious design, introduce quite a few bold ideas, you improve on a lot of existing systems, the things you saw on a previous slide, but actually, when you talk to the community, I think the approach should be different. Why? Because the goals are different. So you are starting a game, there's like still quite a few months in front of you before you release the game. So you want to start a conversation with the community that will last over the course of the whole production. You need to get everyone excited about the shiny and new things, convince everyone that the new things are actually worth it. And I think this is crucial. Quickly recognize the potential missteps in your design, in your ideas. This is something that the guys from Sonic the Hedgehog movie did and experienced, because they did a design for Sonic and people just didn't like it. So still they had time to change it. This worked for us. We started with introducing the really the newest of ideas, choices and consequences, the new thing that wasn't available in the first game, wasn't present in the first game. And we gradually started adding old and familiar elements. Actually, we were perhaps too slow with this, because at some point there were a lot of people saying, where are the zombies? Where are the zombies? I want my zombies in Dying Light. So we started with E3 2018 with basically an announcement and 100% focus on choices and consequences, that this is the new element that will make Dying Light too different from the first game. Next year, we did a full mission example, still choices and consequences, but we started adding the old elements as well. Then in May 2021, yes, we did this vertical slice trailer. We presented basically the entirety of the game, its various systems. So it was like everything, everywhere, all at once. A trailer which lasted, I think, 7.5 minutes. There were the zombies there, but people were still saying, where are the zombies, where are the zombies? So in July 2021, we have released a trailer which focused on the zombies, because everyone wanted to see if they are there, the infected, the monsters. And then we did previews, and then a funny thing happened, because actually this is something that I think we didn't expect to happen that much, because in November 2021, we did a round of previews. We gave the game in its early version, in the preview version, to streamers, YouTubers. They could do anything they would like with it. They created a lot of videos, a lot of content. And the default setting for the game was that all of the enemies had health bars over their head. So it was like the storm, like we didn't anticipate it. It was like the storm of discussion online. Should it be there? Shouldn't it be there? It ruins the game. Actually, for us, it was like when we introduced the health bars, we knew that it's something else. We knew that it's new. We knew that it's changing the game. But when we were sending the preview builds to the YouTubers, they were in the game for such a long time. We didn't really expect that this element would be something that would make people doubt the design. When we were introducing this, we knew that maybe it's tricky, but then we got used to it, and we thought it's like, for us, it was like this natural part of the game. So of course there was this huge storm online. Thankfully, we knew that we will introduce an ability to customize the HUD. We just understood that it's extremely important, so we should make sure that it's as fully featured as possible. And I think this gives you like a friendly reminder and another tip is that you basically need to listen to your community because they are your boss. So that's almost it. A quick recap. If you're working on a sequel, if you work generally on a sequel, it's not your usual or maybe even more usual. This is your recipe for it. You need to understand your game, get to know your players, be very precise on how you want to improve on the things that were working in the first game with your players in mind, exactly answering the players' requests and habits and rituals. If you add something new, make sure that it really matters, that it's really important, that it's really impactful. It's a very neat trick to enrich your game with a new angle, trying to present it, finding a spin on it that would make it interesting and fresh again. And communicate your sequel well with your team and then with the community members. But having said all of this, listen to your community as well. But having said all of this, it's never really that simple. And it's another phrase that has been said from this stage today, from Bartek and Kyle. So once again, hello. It's never that simple. So for my last tip, I have asked another legend to help me. This guy, Kendrick Lamar, so he's like the Bruce Lee of hip-hop, if you're not following hip-hop. Crazy talented guy. So he has this famous song saying, be humble. So you need to be humble because the production of your game will surely surprise you. And as I said, this is like a really wild adventure, but anything can happen on it. So once again, be humble. I hope that there was something in what I said today that will help you on your wild adventure. Have a good luck with your wild adventures, and thank you for spending some time with me. I'm not the only person from Techland here at Digital Dragons, so today we had 2 talks already. So if you haven't seen them, make sure that you watch them online. Tomorrow at noon, we all go to see Edyta, who will be talking about the audio design in Dying Light 2 Stay Human, and Łukasz about City Builder. I know it's the same time, but you are talented, so you will make it. And at 1, Kasia Zielińska will be talking about designing environments from Dying Light 2 Stay Human. All great talks and all more detailed and more exciting, I would say, than mine. So please watch them. Thank you once again. Thanks once again. Thanks once again. And of course, if you have any questions, then I'm here to answer. No questions, I can go eat something. Or maybe? I will answer anything. I'm known for telling too much, so.
Hi, thank you for the talk. As a UX researcher, I'm interested in your get to know your players point. So do you know how a Bartol taxonomy test was conducted? Technically, did you do a play test? And they have them fill in service, or did you reach your community online?
So if I got the question correctly, is how we understand what kind of players we have, right?
Exactly.
So what I said, so first of all, we look at all of the feedback that we can gather online from various sources. We also, I personally, but we also have a team of people doing this. We engage with our community directly, face-to-face on Twitter and Reddit, etc., etc. But this is one pool of data that we use. Another one is the data gated from game, and we try to cross-check those things. So by knowing what people play, how they play, how much time they spend on the game, what content is being interacted with most, and combining this with the feedback expressed in words, we can try to make some theories. Sometimes we even reach to the players directly to try to engage them in conversation, try to understand why they say things that they say, dig a little deeper, because sometimes you really need that context to understand what needs to be changed or improved correctly.
I see. So you didn't just do the test, you did you collected the data from...
And of course, over the production, we had tons of playtests focusing on different things. So we were testing even the initial ideas when they were on paper, then various gameplay mechanics, focusing on those gameplay mechanics on prototype stage, and then when the game was like almost ready. We were playtesting and improving over the last polish phase. Basically, the final game, the ready game.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, you've been talking about making a plot more engaging, but adding some choices to the game. And at some point, you've been working with Chris Avellone.
Yes.
Yes, and after he left, did the concept of the plot change so much, or you just go?
No, not really. Like Chris shared with us his expertise with how to work with nonlinear games. So he has like a lot of experience with that, and he basically helped us to start working on nonlinear games, understand what it takes, understand what needs to be done to deliver a nonlinear game. Then we introduced our own writers. Currently, the design team is being led by Piotr Szymanek, who is one of the writers from HBO TV station. It's not the correct, like HBO movie production company. He did the scripts for Wataha, and there was another Odwilż that was, I think, also on HBO. So he is leading. He took the story and he led the team that was working and developing on the story based on the initial, let's say, analysis, brief, and concept of how you can move with the nonlinear game that we had from the pre-production.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. See you around. Take care.